On the agenda tonight, we're going back to the early 70s. We're going to be taking a look at T-Rex, and they're going to be performing 20th Century Boy. Hello, Phil here from Wings of Pegasus, and welcome to another analysis video. If you enjoy this video, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe. So let's get the guys up on screen and see how they get on. So unfortunately, I'm having to put this edit into the video because it got blocked worldwide, and I think it was the TV company who has blocked the use of the footage and not necessarily the audio. So what I'm going to do is just remove the video section and also the audio to be safe, and I'm going to put a link to the video that I watched in the description below so you guys can click on that, and I'll also pin it to the top of the comments. Go and watch that and then return here for the analysis, and I'll see you guys in the comment section. This is such an interesting performance to look at from different angles because, as you might have noticed, we've actually got some double tracking going on here vocally. So it means that Marc here is singing along to another vocal that's been recorded, and what I think has happened is that the performance they're getting down now was recorded, and the vocal from that is obviously on the record or on record from this performance, and then he's added another vocal after the fact, just putting another line into the mixer and just using the same mic, probably not even with the band performing, but just laid that over the top in order to give it that double-tracked sound, which is so important to the overall sound of that original track. When compared to that original record, which was released this same year, 1973, this performance seems like it's got more of a rough edge to it, and I'll put that down to the fact that the backing vocals aren't in there, and also the guitar is the main focus here with the overdrive on the sound, the fullness of the tone, because on the record the guitar has been double tracked, and when you do that with guitars you can start to get a chorus sound to the guitars because they have been layered on top of each other, especially if you're not hard panning them left and right in the stereo field. So with that, it tends to have a softer sound when you add a bit of chorus to it. Same thing with the vocals and double tracking vocals, which we do have here in the live setting, but certainly the guitar just comes across as one guitar that is so up front because it has to be. Just to mention, I have done an independent video on Marc where I do get into the history of T-Rex, but also Marc's history, if you want to check that video out independently. But the thing to look out for in this live performance as well is the way that Bill Legend is drumming, because whenever there is a mimed performance, pretty much the drums are going to give it away, because unless it's a fake kit, the drummer is always just hovering above the hi-hat or not really going for it on the drum kit, because drum kits are very loud. So if you're miming along to something, the crowd would be able to hear your drums over the top of the backing track, and it will just give it away. So the drummers tend to really go for it lightly, especially on TV, where, as you can see, Bill in the background and in the intro is really going for this on the whole kit, but especially that hi-hat. He's letting loose on it. So we know that all of the instruments being played here are live. Just from a technical perspective, recording wise, you'll be able to see Marc move away from the mic sometimes. You can still hear his voice, and there'll be other vocal phrases that you can hear, but he isn't actually singing them. So it means that probably what's happened is they want that double take vocal in order to get the double track sound, but also he might have been leaving the vocal phrases too quickly, and then they thought, well, it would be good to fill in that sound, but then also he might not have understood that the sound he can hear on stage when he's performing isn't the sound that they're receiving through the desk, and often that is the case when you are singing into a microphone, and you can be quite far away sometimes and still pick up the sound, but through the mixing desk, as soon as you move away from a cardioid mic, especially any kind of distance, it will have a fading out effect to the point where if you move too far, it just won't be able to hear you, especially if you've got the drums and bass and guitar with a heavy tone high in the mix, and bongos that we've got really high in the mix here as well. We'll get the guitar out at the end of the video to go through the chords and the style of play here, the way that Marc is playing it as well. Just to point out that double take of the vocal at 3 minutes and 9 seconds. If you watch the video again, you'll see a really clear example of that where Marc is doing a little scream and moves away from the microphone, and then you hear the scream again. So they're not perfectly synchronized because of those two separate takes. But this performance is totally live from a vocal perspective, an instrumental perspective as well. It's just been overdubbed later, so don't let that put you off from the live performance that we've just watched. So getting into the guitar, it's a great example of one of those songs that has a riff in there that is so hooky, it's going to just hook in your mind the whole time. You're going to be humming it, walking around, and it's also so easy to play. And this is the thing, that it's never the case that the more technical you become at playing, then the better songs you can write. More often than not, the best songs are the easiest ones to play, because those are the ones that have such a strong melody that can stick in your head, and you can walk around and sing them yourselves, and you can think of the melody in your head because it's not too fast to repeat. And it's exactly what we've got here. The most basic form here of E at the bottom of the guitar, one of those chords that you start to practice as soon as you start to learn to play the guitar. But having this, that's all it is, just a down, up, down, and then mute the guitar. Like that, and you've got your intro. So when we go into the riff, the interesting thing here is that Marc is playing the chord of the E and then playing the riff with his third finger and not playing the rest of the chord, because some people will play it and still keeping the chord in place, whereas Marc is breaking away like that. So we've got two very distinct sections that we're playing. We're playing our chord and then the little riff, and that's just going to a G, and just tweaking that G down, pull it down away from you. And I'm talking about the third fret of the low E string here, and you'll get that sound. He doesn't go all the way to the semitone above, the G sharp, which would sound like this. We don't hear that note, so it is just a tweak towards it, but not all the way to it. So it's quite subtle, and as you would have noticed there, the third time through, he gives it a little bit of vibrato, like that. So you can look out for that also. Sometimes he does it twice, implement that vibrato, and that's up to you how many times you want to throw it in there. It is one of those riffs that you want to play really loosely as well. This isn't something where you're going to be going and playing it like that. You've got to lean into it a bit, give it a bit of attitude, and don't worry about being aggressive with hitting the strings. Obviously, you don't want to be going and hitting all of those open strings with the riff part, but you do want to be hitting the strings in such a way that you're catching the muted A string and even maybe the muted D string as well, so you get this sound. You can hear there's a lot of noise going on, and that is all underneath that note there. You can hear the A coming through, and it doesn't really matter. That's the whole point. It's the attitude of the playing, not the technicalities of exactly which notes are ringing out and which notes aren't. That's what will make it sound like it's got attitude, because of the way it's being played, not the notes that you're hearing. The only thing to look out for when playing the E chord in this composition is making sure that you go as far as the G string. So that first finger playing the G sharp, and that's going to be just your normal E chord. But if you don't hear that G sharp in there, it will just turn into a fifth. Whereas you want to hear the major component of the chord, because it definitely does ring out. In the verse, we've got a transition to A. Not many chords in this song, but A is one of them, and it's going to be played in such a way. It's going to be this classic blues riff. I am applying a little bit of palm mute in there just to make it sound a little bit tidier, but you can just fill out the sound if you want to. And this is something that Marc does. He implements a little bit of palm muting now and again, so it's just dependent on how you're feeling at the time. But underneath vocals, you generally want to apply a little bit of palm muting just to allow your vocal more room to breathe and sit on top of the instrumentation rather than having to sing over the top of a really loud guitar in the background. But you'll see all the top players apply a little bit of palm mute with their playing when they're singing at the same time. But anyway, it means that we've got this. And Marc's actually playing this with his second finger, so he's stretching across. And it's just down to you how you want to play that. It's going to be dependent on your personal preference. Also the size of your hands. It looks like Marc is stretching across a little bit in order to get that, but I would play that with my third finger normally, like that. So as we move on, I'll play through that section because when we get to the chord again, our E, we have a little run down the low E string. So we've got this. Like that. So that was that little movement up the guitar, and it doesn't really matter where you go, but that's what's happening on the right hand. It's going down, up, down, and I'm starting down, up, down, and I'm just moving my hand up and down. And you get that sound. So Marc throws that in now and again. You can't really hear it too clearly, but he definitely does the motion in order to run down to that E chord. And again, when you get to the E chord, you want to make sure you include that G string in there because it is a fundamental part of the overall sound. And then of course we're back into the riff. The only other part that we have is the slide up in the chorus from the A, and as you can see I'm barring here. This is how Marc's playing it, not going as high as the E string at the top, because then you'll get your sixth sound. As we always say, the Beatles loved that chord to end on, but a lot of bands did in the 60s. Anyway, the A is being played, and then Marc is just shifting up 2 frets with that first finger and muting the A string with the side of his finger. So you get the sound of a B chord, but without that A string with the root note of the B. So we get this sound. And just single strums in that chorus section. You'll also have in there a slight change in the dynamics with that palm muting on the E. Just like that, quite simple downstrokes and just resting the palm on the bridge and where the string meets the bridge so you can still hear the pitch of the strings rather than going too far. And then you lose everything. If I move my hand down, you can now start to hit those strings coming in and the pitch of them. So there is a little lead part at the end. That kind of thing. It also looks like he's doing lots of alternate picking, but not necessarily moving his hand very fast. So it might be a case of that kind of thing. And then the ending, it's all a little bit crazy, but and that kind of thing on that low E string, and letting the amp feedback a little bit if it wants to. It's one of those things that it's not a rehearsed ending in order to go exactly to the G and bend up between the G sharp and the A isn't something that would have been rehearsed. It's just the wild ending because it's all about getting the wild sound to the playing. I've just put the guitar down, but another thing to mention about the tuning is that it is slightly above E and not quite as far as F. So we're between keys here. So if you are playing along with this video, you'll find that your guitar doesn't match up, and if you play it a semitone higher, it still doesn't match up. We are right between the keys. So I think the original was just in E, so you'll probably be okay playing along to that. And it's another thing that really does indicate that this is live, because the bass and the guitar have probably just tuned up together and gone ahead with the performance, because of course the drummer and the bongos don't have to be tuned, and they just were in tune with each other and went for it. Just to mention Steve Curry as well on bass, because he and Bill on drums, Bill Legend, have to be in the pocket. They've got to be tight, and considering that there are so few instrumental elements going on here, there won't be anywhere to hide. Sometimes you do have the luxury of having a huge band, and there might be some people within that band who maybe play the wrong thing or make a little mistake, but it's relatively insignificant compared to the overall sound because of the amount of band members. And in this kind of setup, when you're talking about just Marc playing his guitar, singing at the same time, and then Bill on drums and Steve on bass, those are the real focus points. And if anything goes wrong, it's going to stick out like a sore thumb, because you only have 3 instruments and only 2 instruments that are supplying the chords and the melody to the performance. The bongos and the drums aren't going to be doing any of that. So it has to be a spot-on performance all around here. And I love the fact that it is so stripped back. Obviously not from a tone perspective. It is going to be heavy because of the overdrive and the Les Paul, but we've got the stripped back performance of just getting up, setting up and playing. But it's great to have a look back at this performance and a standalone performance, considering it doesn't have any of those extra elements of production that were on the original record. It's very much just plug in and play, get your guitar sound nice and big, turn it up to 11 and rock out. Great performance here from T-Rex, and thank you guys so much for suggesting this video for me to take a look at, and keep those suggestions coming in the comments below. Let me know what you guys think, and if you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe, and I'll see you guys at the next one. Rock!